Regions in the Midwest often have some difficulty changing the perceptions of young people about career tracks. Lauren Buchanan talks about that on the Midwest Flourish. Hi, I'm Rick Farrant, and I am your host for the Midwest Flourish. Our guest today is Lauren Buchanan, who is the Workforce Development Manager for Wert Works, which is part of Wert Economic Development. Welcome, Lauren.
Thank you for having me.
Why don't we start with what you do and the counties, the region that you cover, and how your work, meshes with the overall mission of workforce and economic development.
Sure. So my job has a lot of different caveats. So I run the Wert Works website, which is a hyperlocal job board just focusing on Wert County businesses and Wert County business owners and filling those roles. And that especially has gained traction in an age where there are a lot of scam job postings. And so these are all vetted and, it's my job to, make sure that these companies and these roles actually exist. So it provides a form of security. And then another part of my job is working with businesses to ensure that their roles are filled, to maybe pinpoint some untapped populations to fill those roles or connect them with local schools. And then another part of my role is connecting schools and employers, not just K through 12 schools, but vocational schools. And then Wert actually has a new Northwest State Community College campus, and they are set to open and start offering classes later this fall. So that's a really exciting time for us. And then I am just kind of wraparound support for other agencies, such as Ohio Means Jobs, which is job and family services through the state. I also work with the Business Development Corporation and the County Foundation just to help wherever I can when it comes to workforce and upskilling folks and really making sure that businesses and job seekers alike have the tools that they need to succeed.
So you, excuse me, you're always looking for something to do.
You know it.
To fill your time. I have it. So a good portion of your area in Ohio is rural. And, some of the challenges that you face are challenges that are faced by a lot of rural areas in the Midwest. And one of those is affordable housing, which I think is, it's a challenge for everyone. Where is your region with affordable housing? Which is really important to workforce development when it comes to, business attraction and retention and actually drawing a workforce into the Wert area.
Affordable housing certainly is a key component of that. And I would say Wert is on track with the same struggles as other rural counties in Ohio and Indiana alike. Our office has spoken with housing developers and those who could build apartment complexes, and even the cheapest bottom of the barrel apartment that could be offered if a new complex went up would go for $1,200. And just based on wages in our county, a lot of families can't pull that off, especially if they have children and need the space for those children to learn and grow. So that is something that we are navigating. And actually recently and earlier this summer, we started working with Bowling Green State University has a pretty robust economic development team, and they have started doing these regional, roundtables essentially to pinpoint problems with clusters of counties to not just, advocate and go up to bat for these issues, which are common, but it's also a way to ensure that we get state and federal funding. And so it's a collaborative effort, and we are working very hard to do that because affordable housing, it's not just important to workforce, but important to work-life balance and the health of our residents. And, when you don't have access to housing, that's when people stay in unhealthy marriages or family dynamics. That's when people feel like they don't have a way out and they're trapped. And so it's just a vicious cycle that I don't have a solution for. And, our office doesn't have a solution for right away, but we are actively working on it.
Good. Well, I think everybody's working really hard on it. And, there are some challenges within the challenge, certainly, which, one is the affordability. The other is finding the developers. The other is finding land that is available to do the development. So certainly. A whole bunch of things go into that. You work with both individuals and employers.
Correct.
And we're going to talk quite a bit about that. But you have two entities. One deals with employers, one deals with individuals, and one is the Learn and Return Initiative, and then the other is a Relocation Initiative. Why don't you talk a little bit about those two?
Sure. So the Learn and Return Initiative is actually an initiative with the Van Wert County Foundation, and I advocate heavily to, job seekers and students going off to college or to vocational school or to upskill. And, that program is, if you graduated from a high school in Van Wert County, you go away for some type of schooling, and then you come back and live and work in the county, you get some help and assistance on your student loans. So that's a huge incentive to move back home and, to surround yourself with a support system. And I think one thing that students and parents misperceive about Van Wert County, just because there have been so many new businesses pop up in the last 10 years. When I took this role, I was moving back home, and I think some of the growth economically surprised me too, because it's not just agriculture, manufacturing, and healthcare anymore. We have, engineering and all of these, fascinating employers and fields and jobs that require all skill levels from, high school diploma to a trade skill to, a PhD or a master's degree. So I think there is so much to offer that maybe has not been promoted or gotten the spotlight it deserves. So I think those who have taken advantage of that Learn and Return program have been pleasantly surprised with the bounties that have come with it, and also just what a great start in life to have that assistance given to you.
Yeah, but a quick question before you get into the relocation initiative. One thing we know about young people, just generally speaking for a lot of them, is they want to get the heck out of Dodge.
Oh, yeah,
right?
That was me.
And you did. You were one of those. And sometimes people, when they do that, they find that actually where they were was pretty good after they've gone out and explored. Like, you may not have an answer for this, but what can be done about encouraging people like that? I mean, do we tell them, go spread your wings, go have fun, but think about us because here are all the good things? I mean, is that pretty much how it works?
Yeah, I mean, baby bird just had to fly in my situation, but I knew the nest was always there to come back to. And so I think, really when you go to urban areas or other regions, while there is an appeal, obviously, you'll come to find that you grew up in a safe place. You grew up in a school district that genuinely cared and made sure that you had applicable skills, leaving with a diploma or a GED. So I can't emphasize the community aspect of, Van Wert County and the surrounding areas enough.
Yeah. What about the relocation initiative?
Sure. So the relocation initiative just launched this summer through JobsOhio, so through the state. And this is where employers can tap into out-of-state talent. So, we have a business called Alliance Automation, and they make automated lines for every business sector you can think of, from healthcare to manufacturers. And essentially, so if a company wanted to build a new cooler, they would say, hey, this is the cooler we want to build without, multiple people on a production line, help us. And so engineers there come up with an automated line for it and then go install it. It's fascinating to see what they've done. But that takes a lot of high-tech skilled engineering, and while we are seeing a huge increase in school-age kids in our area pursuing that career path, these jobs are growing faster than our students can graduate. So this is something where you can tap into maybe the engineering programs at Purdue or other prestigious schools. And there is an incentive, I believe it is up to $30,000 per employee that is relocated. And it's up to the employer on how they spend that, but more than likely they are using that funding to help with relocation expenses for the job candidate.
So the $30,000 goes to the employer?
Correct.
So the employer is the one who is employing somebody who has relocated from somewhere else?
Correct.
And that's per employee?
I believe so. And I know there's a limit per employer, but the funding is there through the state as long as there is money to give.
So then the employer is actually doing the recruiting, right? It gives them an incentive to go outside of the area to go and find workers.
Correct.
Okay, got it. So what is the message? So what we know is we know that a lot of we're going to fill our positions with our existing employees, right? That's kind of like the thing that people are talking about. What kind of message are you giving to adults to skill up so that they can be ready for, the jobs that not only exist now, but are going to exist 5-10 years from now, because we know that technology is constantly changing and the skills that you need to survive in a job are increasing too.
Absolutely. So what I tell adults and people who are already in the workforce is 9 times out of 10, it comes down to your soft skills and how you show up to an employer and how you are a team player, because the state funding is there through a program called TechCred. It was established back in 2019, but essentially it is a reimbursement to employers to upskill employees for these trade certifications or AI certifications. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of different credits and upskilling options for those teams. And there are colleges, vocational schools that will tailor that programming to, get it fully reimbursed by the state. So as long as employers are willing to upskill, which they know this funding is available, this is heavily marketed to those employers, the option is there to get it paid for. And so I think that's a huge incentive, but that doesn't come at the snap of a finger. You have to put in your time with an employer, and you have to show that you're trustworthy and that you are worth the investment that an employer is putting into you.
Yeah, and one of the barriers that I've seen is that so basically what you've done is you put everything on a silver plate and you've said, okay, if you want to upskill, if you want to learn more, if you want to make more money, here it is. We have the programs. A lot of them are free to the employee. And yet you still have people who they bristle at change. They really don't want to change. And I think, I don't know if you have an answer for this, but I think that is the message that befuddles a lot of people. How do we get through to people and say, yeah, I get it. You want to do the same thing that your grandfather did. It doesn't work anymore. Technology is changing. And oftentimes messages like that, they just fall on deaf ears. Do you have a solution to that?
I don't know if anybody has the perfect solution, but I do have a perspective to that. And it's the fact that we are in such a fascinating time to, just be of working age right now, because we have 6 different generations in the workplace. Every generation has its niche, its qualities, historical events that have shaped them into who they are and their core beliefs as a generation. And so there is such a need for, even if you are not mechanically inclined, which I will say I certainly am not, but there is a need for good teachers. There is a need for good communicators. There is a need for people who understand rules and can communicate complex ideas. And I think that finding your spot with the soft skills that you have and the given talents that you have, I think it's a matter of career exposure. So I know our county has, really upped the ante with career exposure incentives for students, but I do think that's lacking with adults. So I know that I have recently started a social media campaign to spotlight different career trends and fields every Saturday on the Wert Works Facebook pages. And so I am doing my darndest, but with this line of work, you see the impact of it years down the road. So sometimes it does get discouraging not seeing instant impact, but I am confident in what I'm doing.
Yeah, because I think over time is really what it's going to take, because really what you're doing is it's a culture change. Right, and that takes time. And you also have a keen focus on talent development involving young people. So tell me about those efforts, and what are the barriers to ensuring that young people can either be job ready or ready to, carry on at a higher level of education?
Sure. So Wert County has a few really great programs for students. So one of them is the opportunity to go to Vantage Career Center, and that's an opportunity for juniors and seniors. And there are so many programs and certifications that can be obtained in between health and cosmetology and engineering, welding, all of those high-skilled manufacturing trades. And I think the kids who are going to Vantage now, they were in probably fifth or sixth grade when the pandemic happened, and they really saw the impact and the importance of essential roles. And so they, worked toward, and they gravitated toward the idea of going to Vantage because I'm 31 or 32 years old, and
okay.
I'm at that age where I can't remember how old I am.
I'm sorry. Was this a recent birthday, and that's why you had to correct yourself?
Yes,
okay.
it was.
Okay.
So anyway, when I was in high school, Vantage was marketed to me as the place where the bad kids go, and like the kids not bound for college or the military would go. And so it was just instantly marketed to me as icky and that I wasn't going there. And in all reality, I hate that was the viewpoint. And but that perspective has so changed since the pandemic, and it's actually competitive to get into Vantage now. And there are valedictorians from high schools that are going to Vantage just to have an edge. And a lot of them may get these certifications and then go on to get a business degree.
Do you wish that you had gone to Vantage?
I am a big believer in things happen the way that they're supposed to happen. So,
but you were indoctrinated in the 4-year degree track, right?
I sure was. Yeah. I was that stereotypical millennial. So, if I had it all to do over, maybe I'd look at Vantage a bit closer. But I still don't regret. I think I was one of those people made to go to college, but. Steering back to what we're doing for young people, this year, Vantage actually had to turn about 100 students away. And those were the students who stereotypically needed to go to Vantage. That way they would have something after high school. And so there has been a lot of discussion on how to accommodate those students. Some of them got to go to Vantage for lab and then just did their, general eds back at their home school, which traditionally they did the whole day at Vantage. Maybe in the future, we are talking about expanding to, have work-based learning experiences and lab experiences at businesses. Still very early discussions, but there's a numerous amount of solutions, and it's hard because the reason these kids were turned away was simply because of space. But with declining birth rates at an all-time low, the need for expansion is up in the air because is this a temporary problem? So there's just a lot of forecasting when it comes to that. But with a population that is aging, Vantage is actually expanding to their medical academy.
Well, I was going to talk about that. They're going to do a medical academy, and I'm going to assume the reason why you're doing that, I could answer this question, but you see a future, at least in the region, or frankly in the nation, for jobs in healthcare or in the medical arena.
Sure thing. People are living longer. That is the answer to it. So, and with that, there has been such an investment in medical technology at the Ohio Health Campus in Van Wert, and nursing homes are expanding and, growing in their residency. I think there is also a growing need for home health care because a lot of people are, taking care of their parents and aging family members under their own roof, and that's becoming more and more common. So, there's absolutely a need for that adequate space. And, I think growing up, I looked at healthcare as you went there when you were sick, needed surgery, had a broken bone, and it was an absolute emergency. But I think, and this is the beauty of social media, every anatomy system has gotten a spotlight. And, the focus on mental health and nutritional health, it all coincides with one another. And so there's just a boom in different healthcare careers simply because of exposure, which is awesome. So there's just a need for that.
Yeah, I like to say that healthcare as an industry is probably the most recession-proof industry when it comes to job security, right? Because we're always going to need healthcare. And especially with an aging population, we're going to need it even more. And so unlike a lot of other industries, we can say this is going to be around. Regardless of what happens with government funding or all the other stuff, people still need to be taken care of. So, absolutely. And you're right about home health care, which is just the projections are that particular segment of it is just, it's going to go through the roof. The need for professionals who can carry out that care in the home. I read, could be wrong, that 88% of the land use in Van Wert County specifically, but probably in the rural areas too, is devoted to agricultural use. Does that present any kind of challenges when it comes to workforce development?
Yes and no, because yes, in the sense that we are always looking to expand and welcome businesses here, but no, in the aspect that, these farms are only being enhanced by the farmers that tend to them. And there's an additional job aspect with how much automation has gone into farming. And that really just drives home how important STEM careers are. And if you look at a business like Truland Equipment, they have several locations in Ohio and Indiana, but their bread and butter is selling these AI tools to farmers to be able to forecast, to be able to, check on their crop and to be able to maximize their yield. And I think that there is just a new way. It's not just getting out in your boots and walking the fields. It's truly an art of analyzing risk and being able to communicate and analyze data. And so I think that has appealed to maybe a newer generation, because kind of like when I was in school and Vantage was maybe spotlighted as something that wasn't for me. I think farming and agriculture was maybe looked at as a redneck career or something that less intelligent people do, which absolutely is not the case. If you talk to most farmers, they are some of the smartest people you'll ever meet.
Yeah, but you also have not every young person wants to stay on the farm.
Sure.
Right. And so you have that challenge too, right? Just like getting out of a city, they're saying, I'm going to get out of this life. And so I think that does present a challenge. But you're right about the technology of farming, and maybe that will entice people who really have no experience in farming whatsoever, because there are a lot of tasks, right, that are, the use of drones, for instance, which I think will increase in almost every industry, and how we utilize that. You're also engaged in business and I think it's business retention visits, business retention and expansion visits, which is something I know that we do in the region in Northeast Indiana. Tell me about those visits in your neck of the woods and what happens during those visits and what your goals are.
Sure. So I think every business retention visit looks a little bit different depending on where I am going. So some of them are an appointment in my office. A lot of them are walking, factory floors and, pinpointing opportunities for improvement or incentives that I can present to them and connect them to resources. But essentially, I always do a check on, how their workforce is doing, biggest challenges, are we utilizing relationships with all of the school systems in the area? Because, work-based learning is such an increased option and something that didn't necessarily come into play back when I was in school. So I make sure that those things are being utilized. We have access to this software called Placer AI. So when you are on your smartphone and you see, these social media apps or shopping apps that ask if you want your location tracked, and you can select whatever you want, but I think most people they know that their data is in the void. So you check yes, and that gives me exposure to a business from any point in time. And, where are patrons coming from, or where are employees coming from? Where are they going after work? And, what are some of their demographics? And so I think that is very telling. And so, I can point out where a lot of employees are coming from. And sometimes I ask customized questions depending on that. So, for example, there is a plant that just opened in 2024. And, they had a lot of their startup engineering team come from Mexico. And so I recently actually tracked their Placer AI, and a lot of their employees are coming from like the local hotels, which I assume are those, startup engineers, because, they were viewed as coming here temporarily to get things started. So then that opened up the conversation to business retention and workforce retention and kind of what some of those struggles are. And I always try to ensure that this is a judgment-free zone. I am not here to sell you to anything. I am here to, as a local and somebody who grew up in the area, I'm here to share maybe some public perspective and what I hear from the job seeker point of view. So I am kind of the mediator and middleman between those populations.
You talked about one instance there, and I realize that situations in businesses change almost by every second, depending on a lot of things. But in your experience, what would you say, are the one or two top things that businesses these days are most concerned about?
Businesses these days are thrilled with the technical talent that comes in from employees who are so young because they're sponges and they can learn as quick as a whip. But on the flip side, they're hired for their technical skills, fired for their soft skills. So just that human aspect. And like I said earlier, these kids who are graduating high school, they were in late elementary school, early middle school when the pandemic happened. And so that really shaped their social perceptions and their communication strategies and how they view interpersonal communication. And that can really affect them on a plant floor or on a storefront. And so it just comes down to, really teaching the importance of communication and walking through expectations very clearly.
Yeah, we could have a whole session here on soft skills and communication, which maybe at some point we should, because that's a problem.
Sure.
One other thing I wanted to touch on was, Van Wert, like a lot of communities, loves to tout what it's close to, right? So in the case of Van Wert, you're close to Fort Wayne, Indiana. You're close to Toledo, Ohio. You might want to throw a few others in there, but that's something that you touted on your website. And close to, interstates, which, gosh, I've seen that in so many places saying this would be the reason to come here, whether you're coming here to work or whether you're coming here to start a business. In your case, does promotion of that, do you feel, or do your colleagues feel, does that really work? Does that really attract people that maybe you're not in an urban center, but you're darn close?
Yes, I think that promoting those distances does have an appeal, especially to manufacturers coming in, because given our location, you can get any product to or from your facility, 60% of the population in 24 hours with logistics. We also have rail that butts up. We just expanded our airport runway so corporate jets can come in and leave now. They actually just had the ribbon cutting for that a few days ago. So very exciting time to expand those offerings. And I think it's also an appeal because we actually recently had a site visit from a prospective company that had a confectionery business. And so they were looking for ingredients, and obviously being in the middle of a huge agricultural hub was a huge appeal to them because they were within earshot of all the ingredients that they needed, but they were also within earshot of, for some foreign site investors, they are looking for a community for, folks like them and with their heritage. And so, being in an epicenter, within reasonable distance from big cities, that's a huge appeal for things like Saturday school and, things in other cultures that are the norm. So I think promoting that is important to do to, make sure that people know that they are supported in every way that we know how. And I think in our area, we are so conditioned to, it's not a problem to drive to Fort Wayne or Toledo or Lima and even, take a quick trip to Cleveland. That was so normalized in my childhood. But I think it's, on the flip side, I once dated a guy who grew up in Fort Wayne, and he gave me gruff when I told him that I wanted to go to the movie theater across town because that was a far drive. So I think it's truly your perception of how you grew up and what you consider to be far. So we just try to keep it honest with where we are and, how long it takes to get to places.
Does that proximity to urban centers, do you think, and maybe you can talk about yourself, is that an attraction for younger workers?
I think so, because it expands, hobbies, it expands, social communities and finding maybe other people around your age. So I think, really promoting a sense of community is something that I take a lot of pride in because there is so much more than your 40 hours in a work week.
Yeah. Listen, thank you for stopping by. Been a great discussion. We could go on for a long time, but actually we can't. but maybe we'll have you back on again. But thank you, Lauren, for sharing your thoughts and ideas about the Van Wert area.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, take care.
That's a wrap on today's episode of the Midwest Flourish podcast. Want to dig deeper or get involved? Head to marketingthemidwest.com to explore how we can work together to empower your community to flourish. Let's keep the Midwest momentum going and shape the future of our region together.